You ever have one of those moments where you realize your peace isn't yours anymore? For me, it started with a single puff of smoke. I'd moved into this quiet little suburban neighborhood to get away from chaos, to finally breathe. I'm a single mom, recently divorced, and I bought this house because of the backyard. It had an open space, perfect for a small fire pit where my daughter and I could roast marshmallows and talk about life under the stars. I built that fire pit with my own hands, stones from the local quarry, gravel, safe and sound. It was my symbol of starting over. But to the HOA, it was a violation. His name was Richard Gaines, the HOA president. You know the type. Polo shirts tucked into khakis, clipboards, a smug smile that says, "I own this street." The first letter arrived 3 days after my first fire. "Dear homeowner, your unauthorized outdoor fire feature violates Section 14A of the Community Code. Cease usage immediately or face a fine." I thought it was a joke, a fine for sitting by a campfire. I called him. "Mr. Gaines, it's just a small fire pit. I built it safely, and my daughter." He cut me off. "Rules are rules, Ms. Jensen. No open flames allowed, not even family fun." That word, family fun, he said it like poison. A few days later, a $500 fine appeared in my mailbox. $500. For a pit that cost me $80 in materials and 2 weekends of labor. I was furious, but I stayed calm. I sent him photos of the pit, the safety ring, even the fire extinguisher I kept nearby. He didn't care. He wanted control, so I kept using it, quietly. I wasn't about to let a power-hungry HOA ruin the only joy we had. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a crisp Friday evening. My daughter had friends over, and we were roasting marshmallows, laughing, when headlights flashed across my fence. Then came the red and blue. Police. 2 officers stepped out, flashlights in hand. "Ma'am, we received a complaint about an unauthorized fire hazard." I stood frozen, tongs still in my hand. "You've got to be kidding me, it's just a small pit." Behind the officers stood Richard, arms crossed, smirking. "She's been warned, multiple times. She's violating HOA safety code." One of the officers sighed, clearly annoyed to be there. "Ma'am, could you please extinguish the fire for tonight? It's not worth a citation." I wanted to scream. Instead, I stared at Richard. "Is this what you do for fun? Call the cops on moms roasting marshmallows?" He didn't even flinch. "Rules are rules. Maybe next time you'll learn to follow them." That night, I sat beside my now-cold fire pit, staring at the ashes. My daughter peeked out the window, scared. I promised her it would be okay, but deep down, I knew this was war, because people like Richard don't stop until they feel powerful, and I wasn't about to hand him that satisfaction, so I started digging, not dirt this time, but information. I read the HOA bylaws line by line. I studied city ordinances. I talked to the county clerk, the fire department, even a lawyer friend. And that's when I found it, a loophole. The HOA's ban wasn't on fire pits. It was on open flames not sanctioned by public event permits. And guess who could apply for a public event permit? Anyone, including me. If Richard wanted to make my fire pit illegal, I'd make it the centerpiece of the biggest legal fire this neighborhood had ever seen. And I'd do it by the book in front of cops, county officials, and the entire town. Because sometimes revenge isn't loud, it's lawful. So I picked up my phone and I made the call that would turn my quiet backyard into something unforgettable. The county fair. And it was going to be right here on my property. Because if Richard wanted smoke, I was about to give him fireworks. What would you have done if your HOA called the cops on your fire pit? Would you fight back or give in? Let me know in the comments below. Fire, and don't forget to subscribe for part 2, where my little backyard event becomes a full-blown war with the HOA. When I woke up the next morning, I had 2 things on my kitchen table, a cup of black coffee and a printed copy of the county's event permit application. I must have read it 20 times before I smiled. It wasn't just a loophole, it was an open door, and Richard Gaines had left it wide open. The rules were simple. Any homeowner could apply to host a community event if they met the safety requirements, provided parking, and notified nearby residents. There was nothing in the HOA bylaws that could override a county-approved public permit. And best of all, fire pits were allowed as part of a controlled demonstration or exhibit. So I got to work. I made calls, filled forms, even paid the $300 fee. The county clerk, an older woman named Marge, chuckled as she stamped my paperwork. "A backyard fair? You're really doing this?" I grinned. "Let's just say my HOA isn't a fan of campfires." "Then you're gonna love Section 12, she said, tapping the form. "If it's county-approved, the HOA can't interfere." I walked out of that office feeling unstoppable. By the next week, I had a team. My brother Jake offered to help set up. My friend Linda worked with the local food trucks. I called the petting zoo, a balloon vendor, even the high school band. It started small, but the moment the word fair hit social media, the town lit up. Meanwhile, Richard had no idea. That changed when the notices went out. The permit required me to notify all adjacent residents that a public event would take place on my property. So every neighbor got a friendly flyer. "You're invited. Jensen Family County Fair, live music, food trucks, and marshmallow roast. All county approved." The look on Richard's face when he opened his mailbox must have been priceless. He showed up at my doorstep that afternoon, sunglasses on, clipboard in hand, chest puffed out like he owned the place. "Ms. Jensen," he began, voice dripping with authority, "what is this nonsense about a county fair?" I smiled. "It's exactly what it says, Richard, a county-approved community event. You can't hold a public event on private property within an HOA without board approval." I held up the stamped permit. "Actually, I can. The county supersedes your little rule book." His face flushed red. He snatched the paper from my hand, scanning it. "You think this circus is going to happen not on my watch?" "Then you'd better call your lawyer," I said calmly, "because it's happening in 10 days. He stormed off without another word. Over the next few days, I could feel the tension rising. I caught him talking to neighbors, gesturing toward my backyard like I was building a nuclear reactor. Someone even posted in the HOA Facebook group, "Does anyone know why Ms. Jensen is planning a county fair?" But surprisingly, most neighbors were excited. The HOA had made life miserable for everyone. They hated the fines, the nitpicking, the constant reminders. My little rebellion was exactly the spark they needed. Then came the first official letter. "Cease and desist all preparations for unauthorized use of property. The HOA reserves the right to impose fines up to $1,000 per day for violations." I laughed. They still didn't get it. That weekend, my brother brought over tents and fencing. Linda's husband hauled in a small stage trailer. I set up portable toilets and a generator. The backyard transformed into something magical: string lights, vendor stalls, hay bales for seating. 2 days before the event, a white SUV pulled up. Out stepped a man in a gray suit, the HOA's lawyer, with Richard right behind him. "Ms. Jensen," the lawyer began, "we're issuing a formal injunction. The HOA board has voted unanimously to block your event. It violates community aesthetics and noise ordinances." "Funny," I said, "because the county sheriff's office and the fire marshal both approved it." Richard sneered. "We'll see about that." I didn't flinch. "You'll need to take it up in court. Until then, my fair stands." They left, but I could see the storm brewing. The next day, I got a call from the county courthouse. The HOA had filed an emergency hearing request. They wanted an injunction to stop the event. I showed up in court the next morning, dressed sharp, holding my permit folder like a sword. Richard was there, flanked by his lawyer and 2 board members. The judge looked tired before we even began. "Mr. Gaines, you're arguing that this woman's event violates your HOA's bylaws." "Yes, Your Honor," Richard said. "It's disruptive, unsafe, and damages property values." The judge turned to me. "Ms. Jensen," I handed him my papers. "County approved, fully permitted, insurance verified, safety checks cleared. I've met every requirement." The judge scanned the documents, then looked at Richard. "Mr. Gaines, these are county authorizations. Your HOA's authority doesn't override them." "But no buts. If she's compliant with county law, she's within her rights." Richard's lawyer tried to argue, but the judge cut him off. "Denied. She can hold her event." I didn't smile until I stepped outside the courtroom and saw Richard's face. He looked like someone had told him his kingdom was gone. I leaned in and whispered, "You could have just let me roast marshmallows." He didn't say a word. That night, I got a letter slipped under my door. No envelope, no signature. Just one line written in shaky pen: "You'll regret this." I stood by the window, watching the streetlights flicker across the cul-de-sac. If he thought intimidation was going to stop me, he was wrong. Because this wasn't just about a fire pit anymore. It was about every single person he'd bullied, fined, and silenced. In 2 days, his perfect little neighborhood was going to smell like fried dough, hear the sound of laughter, and watch my fire pit burn brighter than ever, legally, publicly, and beautifully. He wanted control. He was about to lose it live in front of everyone. What would you do if your HOA took you to court over something this petty? Would you back down or fight until the end? Don't forget to subscribe for the next part, because when opening day hit, Richard called the police. And this time, they didn't side with him. The morning of the fair arrived with a golden sunrise, the kind that makes everything feel peaceful before chaos hits. The smell of freshly cut grass mixed with the sweet scent of funnel cake batter. My yard was alive with laughter and energy as vendors unloaded their gear. Kids ran around chasing each other, while my brother Jake adjusted the banner that stretched across my fence. "Welcome to the Jensen Family County Fair, proudly county approved." But I knew deep down the calm wouldn't last. Not with Richard Gaines lurking somewhere nearby. I'd half expected to see his SUV parked outside my house, but there was nothing. Not a sound, not a single HOA board member in sight. It was too quiet. By 10 a.m., the fair was in full swing. The petting zoo was set up, food trucks lined the curb, and local musicians played cheerful tunes. A little fire pit, the spark of this entire war, sat proudly in the center of it all, surrounded by benches and a rope barrier with a sign that read, "County Fire Department inspected and approved." People laughed when they saw it. Some neighbors came just to take selfies next to the sign. Everything was perfect, until the first squad car showed up. Two police officers stepped out, scanning the crowd. The chatter around us slowed, whispers rippling like wind through the crowd. My heart started to pound. I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked over with a calm smile. "Morning, officers, here for the fair." The taller one looked down at his notepad. "Ma'am, we received a complaint about an unauthorized public gathering on private property. HOA board reported potential code violations and safety concerns." Of course, Richard. I took a slow breath, reached into my folder, and handed him my laminated permit. "Here's your authorization, signed and stamped by the county clerk. Fire marshal approved." "Health department cleared." The officer raised his brows, flipping through the pages. His partner glanced at the event. "Looks organized," she said, "and safe." "It is," I replied. "We have emergency exits, fire extinguishers, even crowd barriers." He nodded, then looked up at me. "Seems like you're good here, ma'am. Sorry to bother you. Enjoy your fare." But before they could turn back to their cruiser, a voice sliced through the crowd, loud, angry, and filled with self-importance. "Stop. They can't just walk away." Richard Gaines came storming toward us, red-faced and sweating, waving a folder of papers. Behind him were two other HOA board members, recording everything on their phones like they were about to uncover some great scandal. The crowd went silent. "Officers," Richard barked. "This is an HOA-regulated community. She's violating multiple bylaws, parking violations, public disturbance, unauthorized commercial activity." "Sir," the officer interrupted, "we already verified her permits. Everything checks out." "The HOA doesn't recognize that permit?" Richard spat back. The officer stared at him. "The county recognizes it, and that's what matters." The crowd began to murmur. People started pulling out their phones to record. I saw a few neighbors smirking. One whispered, "He's really losing it." Richard's voice rose to a full shout. "This woman is making a mockery of our community. She's turning it into a carnival. This isn't a fairground, it's a neighborhood." I folded my arms, meeting his glare. "It's both today, Richard. You can stay and enjoy it, or you can leave." He stepped closer, jabbing a finger toward my chest. "You think this is funny? You've embarrassed me, you've disrespected the board, and you're going to regret this." The officer immediately moved between us. "Sir, step back." But Richard kept shouting, gesturing wildly. "Arrest her, you're officers of the law, she's defying authority." The second officer sighed. "Sir, calm down or we'll have to ask you to leave." And that's when it happened. He shoved one of the metal crowd barriers aside, tripping over a folding chair in the process, nearly colliding with a vendor table. The officers grabbed him instantly. The entire fair froze. Cameras were up, people gasping, recording. "Let go of me." Richard shouted, struggling as the officers restrained him. "This is my community. You can't do this." The officer's tone was firm. "Sir, you're under arrest for disorderly conduct and interfering with a lawful event. You have the right to remain silent." I'll never forget the look on his face as they walked him toward the cruiser, a mix of disbelief, humiliation, and rage. Every single neighbor watched, some even clapping quietly as he was guided away. The fair resumed slowly, the tension melting into laughter again. My brother whispered beside me, "You think that'll shut him up?" I smirked. "For a while." But deep down, I knew Richard wasn't done. People like him never quit after losing once. That night, after everyone left and the lights dimmed, I sat beside the fire pit, the same one that started it all, and watched the embers glow under the dark sky. My phone buzzed with dozens of messages from neighbors thanking me, praising the fair, offering to help next time. But one message stood out. "No number, just a text. You might have one today, but you don't know what's coming." I stared at it for a long time, the warmth of the fire fading as a chill ran up my spine. Was it Richard, or someone else from the board? I didn't know, but something told me this wasn't over. Not even close. What would you do if your HOA president got arrested right in front of everyone? Would you feel guilty or satisfied? Comment below and make sure you're subscribed, because in the next part, Richard comes back with something far worse than fines. He brings lawyers. The fair might have ended with laughter and applause, but the storm that followed made that joy feel like a distant dream. By Monday morning, my mailbox was stuffed. 3 new letters from the HOA, each more aggressive than the last. The top one was labeled in bold red. "Notice of violation, immediate action required inside." It accused me of unauthorized commercial activity, public endangerment, and damaging the community's image. Attached were printed screenshots from neighbors' social media posts, photos of my fair, smiling families, even Richard being arrested. The letter ended with a chilling line. The board has voted to pursue civil action for damages to the HOA's reputation. Reputation. That's what this was about, not the fire pit, not the fair, but Richard's pride. I threw the letter onto the counter and rubbed my temples. I'd dealt with petty before, but this was escalation. My brother Jake walked in holding 2 coffees. You look like someone just sued you. I handed him the letter. Pretty much. He skimmed it, snorted. Unbelievable, he got himself arrested and he's still coming after you. Apparently, yes, and this time he's bringing the lawyers. The next few days were quiet, too quiet, the kind of calm that made you uneasy. No HOA patrols, no passive-aggressive notes, no Richard sightings. I knew he was planning something big. Then, Thursday afternoon, I got the knock I'd been expecting. When I opened the door, Richard stood there in a gray suit, flanked by a thin man in glasses holding a briefcase, his attorney. Richard didn't even look embarrassed. He looked hungry for payback. "Ms. Jensen," he said with a smug grin, "you've been officially served." The lawyer handed me a stack of papers thick enough to be a phone book. Civil complaint, Gaines versus Jensen. They were suing me for public nuisance, defamation, and willful violation of community standards. I laughed, couldn't help it. "Defamation, you arrested yourself in front of everyone." Richard smirked, didn't falter. "You humiliated this community. You think the police, the news, the online posts, all that attention help property values. You've turned our neighborhood into a circus." I crossed my arms. "If you're so worried about reputation, maybe stop acting like a dictator." His lawyer cleared his throat. "We'll see you in court, Ms. Jensen. I suggest you retain counsel." When they walked away, I stood in the doorway, clutching the papers, my pulse racing. I'd won every battle so far, but now the war had moved to a battlefield I couldn't handle alone. That night, I called my old college friend, Rachel, who is now an attorney. When I explained everything, she whistled. "They're overreaching, but don't underestimate them. HOAs can make life hell if you don't fight smart. We'll respond, but I want to hit them where it hurts in the record." Within a week, we filed a counterclaim, Jensen versus Gaines and the HOA board, for harassment, emotional distress, and abuse of authority. The courtroom showdown was set. When the day arrived, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Richard sat on the plaintiff's side, shoulders back, looking proud as ever. His lawyer stacked binders and photos like trophies. Rachel leaned toward me. "Stay calm, truth S on your side." The judge, the same one from before, entered. He looked at Richard with a hint of recognition and mild annoyance. "Mr. Gaines," the judge began, "you again?" A few chuckles rippled through the gallery. Richard's jaw tightened. His lawyer stood. "Your Honor, Ms. Jensen's actions have created a public nuisance, encouraged trespassing, and defamed the HOA through social media dissemination of false narratives." The judge raised an eyebrow. "False narratives? You mean the videos of your client being arrested?" You could almost hear Richard's ego crack. When it was our turn, Rachel stood confidently. "Your Honor, my client followed every county regulation, obtained every required permit, and acted within her rights. The HOA's actions are retaliatory, pure harassment for exercising lawful freedoms." She handed over a folder filled with evidence. Permits, inspection clearances, even screenshots of supportive community posts. The judge flipped through them, unimpressed by the HOA's pile of jargon. "Mr. Gaines," the judge finally said, "you don't own this community, you represent it. There's a difference." Richard's lawyer tried to object, but the judge wasn't having it. "Enough. This court finds no basis for the HOA's claim. Ms. Jensen's event was lawful and properly permitted." And then came the part I didn't expect. However, the judge continued, "Given the repeated harassment and misuse of HOA authority, this court orders an audit of the HOA board's actions and finances for the past year." You could hear the collective gasp. Richard's face went pale. His lawyer froze. The judge looked directly at me. "Ms. Jensen, your counterclaim will be considered pending results of that audit." Rachel whispered, "That's huge. If that audit goes south, he's done." When court adjourned, I walked out feeling like I could breathe again. The crowd outside was small, a few neighbors who'd come to watch. They clapped as I stepped out, some patting my shoulder. Richard brushed past them, avoiding eye contact, muttering under his breath, but I caught one phrase: "She has no idea what she started." That night, I sat by my fire pit again, the flames flickering in the cool air. The victory felt good, but it wasn't final. Richard wasn't the kind of man who went down quietly. And sure enough, a week later, a county inspector showed up at my door unannounced, saying there had been anonymous complaints about my property being unsafe. I knew exactly who made them. Richard wasn't just fighting to win anymore. He was fighting to ruin me. What would you do if your HOA president tried to weaponize the system against you, even after losing in court? Would you keep fighting or finally walk away? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe, because in the next part, Richard's secrets start to unravel, and the audit exposes something that shocks the entire neighborhood. The inspector's boots crunched over my gravel driveway as I watched from the porch. arms crossed, heart pounding. He was polite, professional, but I could tell right away he didn't want to be there. "Ma'am," he said, glancing up from his clipboard, "I'm just here to follow up on a few complaints we received about structural safety, noise violations, and livestock." I couldn't help but laugh. "Livestock? Seriously?" He gave a small, sheepish shrug. "Anonymous reports, ma'am, but they were persistent." Of course they were. Richard Gaines probably filed them himself or had one of his bored cronies do it. "Go ahead," I said, stepping aside. "You'll find nothing but a well-behaved dog, a couple of fire pits, and one very tired homeowner." He smiled faintly and began inspecting the yard. Every few minutes he'd make a note, check a box, or look back at me apologetically. After 20 minutes he closed his clipboard. "Honestly, Ms. Jensen, everything looks up to code. I'll file my report and note that there are no violations." I smiled. "Thank you, I know who's behind this." "We get that a lot," he said quietly. "Power-hungry neighbors with too much time and too little sense." When he left, I exhaled, but deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Richard was still out there, bruised ego and all, waiting for a new way to strike. And it didn't take long. 3 days later, I got a call from Rachel, my attorney. "You might want to sit down," she said. "The audit report came in." My stomach dropped. "And it's bad for him." Rachel explained that the court-ordered audit had uncovered massive irregularities in the HOA's finances. Unexplained withdrawals, missing maintenance funds, and consulting fees that went directly to a company owned by none other than Richard Gaines himself. I was stunned. "You're telling me he's been stealing from the HOA?" "Embezzling," Rachel said flatly. "And we have proof. The auditors forwarded everything to the county prosecutor." For a moment, I just sat there, gripping the phone. All those fines, those threats, those self-righteous lectures, and all the while he'd been lining his own pockets. "Rachel," I said slowly, "this is going to blow up the entire board." "It already is," she replied. "The rest of the HOA members are panicking. Half of them didn't even know. The county's launching an investigation, and the judge's office has been notified." I hung up and stared out my kitchen window, watching the sun dip behind the trees. My heart was pounding, but for the first time not from fear, from vindication. The next evening it happened. Blue lights flooded the cul-de-sac. 2 unmarked cars and a sheriff's SUV rolled to a stop in front of Richard's house. Neighbors started peeking through curtains, stepping onto porches, whispering. Then, like a scene from a movie, 2 deputies walked Richard out in handcuffs. I stepped outside, leaning casually against my fence, watching the whole thing unfold. He was shouting, red-faced, struggling against the cuffs. "You can't do this. I'm the HOA president. This is harassment." One deputy muttered something and guided him toward the car. It was poetic justice. The man who'd used authority to terrorize everyone was finally being held accountable. As the car door slammed shut, my next-door neighbor, Mrs. Clark, whispered from her porch, "You really did it, didn't you?" I smiled faintly. "No, he did it to himself." By morning, it was all over the neighborhood Facebook group. "HOA president arrested for fraud." The comments section was chaos, half disbelief, half celebration. I got dozens of messages from neighbors. "Thank you for standing up to him. You gave us all courage. Can we vote for you as president?" For the first time in months, I felt the tension in our community finally break. People were talking, laughing, even planning a neighborhood cleanup, something we hadn't done in years. But then Rachel called again. "Don't celebrate just yet. He posted bail within 12 hours, and he's already filed a counter-complaint claiming you orchestrated this." I froze. "He what?" "He's claiming your fare was a setup to embarrass him and that you leaked financial records illegally. He's desperate, but he's not done." The fire that had been simmering inside me reignited. "Then we'll fight again," I said. "Only this time I won't just defend myself. I'll make sure he never gets to bully anyone again." That night I sat beside the fire pit, staring into the flames. The same fire that started this war now reflected in my determined eyes. Richard might have had power once, but he'd lost his moral high ground, and now he was just a desperate man clinging to ashes. As the crickets chirped and the neighborhood lay quiet, I couldn't help but wonder, how far would he go now that he had nothing left to lose? Would he try to drag me down with him, or finally face what he'd done? What would you do if the person who tried to ruin your life was finally exposed, but still refused to quit? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe, because in the next part, Richard's revenge turns dangerous, and this time the police get involved again, but not in the way anyone expected. The night after Richard's arrest was one of the strangest in my life, a mix of victory and unease. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with texts and calls. Neighbors congratulated me, old friends sent laughing emojis, even the local news station left a voicemail asking for an interview. But beneath all that satisfaction was something darker, a chill I couldn't shake. Because I knew Richard Gaines wasn't done. People like him never just stop. The next few days were eerily quiet, too quiet. No HOA patrols, no new letters, no Facebook rants. But that silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt like the breath you take before a scream. On the third night, just after midnight, I woke up to a strange sound, a dull thud outside my window. I sat up, listening. Then another one. When I pulled back the curtain, my stomach dropped. Someone had thrown something against my garage door. 2 paint-filled balloons splattered bright red. Across the driveway in sloppy black spray paint were the words, "Homewrecker, liar, payback." I froze. My hands started to shake as I reached for my phone and called 911. By the time the police arrived, the paint was still dripping. One officer, a tall woman with kind eyes, took photos while her partner checked the perimeter. "Ms. Jensen," she said, "this looks targeted. Do you have any idea who might have done this?" I hesitated. "Richard Gaines. He was arrested last week. He hates me," but I glanced around the yard. "I don't know if he'd go this far himself," the officer nodded. "Could be one of his supporters or someone he talked into doing it. We'll increase patrols and file a report." They left, but sleep never came back that night. I sat by the window until dawn, watching the flashing police lights fade away, my heart heavy with anger and fear. By morning, the neighborhood was buzzing again. Some came to help clean up the paint. Others whispered quietly as they passed, glancing at the red stains that wouldn't come off completely. Then around noon, a black car pulled up, tinted windows, the kind that just screamed trouble. Out stepped Richard Gaines himself, wearing sunglasses, smirking like he hadn't just been booked for fraud. I walked out onto the porch. "What do you want, Richard?" He raised his hands like he came in peace. "Just came to talk." "After what happened last night," I snapped. "You think I believe you had nothing to do with it?" "Oh, come on," he said, laughing bitterly. "You think I'm that stupid?" "I'm not the one vandalizing homes. You've made plenty of enemies here, Ms. Jensen. Not everyone thinks you're some kind of hero." I took a step closer. "You mean not everyone who lost their little power trip?" He lowered his sunglasses, meeting my eyes. "You don't get it, do you? You humiliated me. The board's collapsing, the county froze our funds, and people won't even look me in the eye. You've destroyed my life." My voice was steady. "No, Richard, you did that." He pointed toward the house. "You think this is over? You think the cops and the court make you untouchable? I'll find a way to make sure you regret ever crossing me." Before I could respond, a police cruiser pulled around the corner, one of the same officers from the night before. She slowed as she recognized Richard. He stiffened, shot me one last glare, and stormed back to his car. The officer rolled down her window. "Everything okay here, ma'am?" I nodded, still watching Richard's taillights fade. "For now." That night I met with Rachel again. She was furious when she saw the photos. "He's getting desperate," she said. "This isn't about the HOA anymore. It's personal and dangerous." "What can we do?" "File for a restraining order, and I'll talk to the prosecutor. Maybe we can connect the vandalism to him. If he violates probation, he's going back inside." So that's what we did. Within days, a restraining order was filed and approved. Richard was legally forbidden from coming near me or my property. But that didn't mean he stopped trying to get to me. He started spreading rumors online, fake stories, wild accusations. He claimed I'd bribed the auditors and forged documents. He even posted doctored photos of me with cash in my hands, pretending to be some sort of criminal mastermind. It was disgusting, and people started picking sides. The community that had once rallied around me began to splinter. At the next HOA meeting, which I attended under police escort, the atmosphere was electric. Half the room cheered when I walked in. The other half glared. Richard wasn't there, but his lawyer was slimy as ever with a stack of papers and a smug tone. "Ms. Jensen's behavior has brought nothing but chaos to this neighborhood. Her actions have led to division, hostility, and property damage." I stood, voice steady. What divided this neighborhood wasn't my fair or my fire pit. It was years of intimidation, abuse, and greed. You can paint me as the villain, but the truth's out, and it's not going away. The room fell silent. Even his lawyer didn't have a comeback. When I left the meeting, though, I noticed something that made my heart skip. A car parked at the edge of the lot, headlights off. It was Richard's. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was violating the order. I pulled out my phone, hands trembling, and dialed the police again. They came quickly this time, and I watched from the safety of my car as they approached his vehicle. He didn't resist. Just stared at me through the windshield as they spoke to him, his expression cold and hollow. One officer gestured toward me. The other put a hand on Richard's shoulder, then led him away once more. As they drove off, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. My knees went weak, and I leaned against my car. I was exhausted from the fighting, the fear, the endless drama. But I wasn't broken. Not yet. Because every time he tried to destroy me, I found a way to stand taller. And something told me that this time, the system wouldn't let him slip through the cracks again. What would you do if someone like Richard kept coming after you, even with the law against them? Would you move away or stand your ground? Comment below and make sure you're subscribed, because the next part gets even crazier. When Richard's secrets finally hit the news, the entire town turns against him, and his empire collapses in a way nobody saw coming. The morning after Richard's second arrest, the air in Maplewood felt different, lighter somehow. The sun seemed brighter, the birds louder. For the first time in months, I actually smiled as I sipped my coffee on the porch. But that peace did last long. By noon, my phone was blowing up again, this time with news alerts. Local headlines splashed across every feed. Former HOA president arrested for harassment. Fraud investigation expanded. County officials opened probe into Maplewood HOA's financial misconduct. It was everywhere, photos of Richard being handcuffed, his house surrounded by police cruisers, boxes of files being carried out by investigators. I couldn't help but whisper, "Finally." Rachel called me, her voice practically glowing with triumph. "Lydia, it's happening. The county just confirmed it. They're digging into every account the HOA touched in the last 5 years. Embezzlement, tax evasion, illegal fines, the whole deal. Please tell me Richard's name is all over it. Front and center. He's not getting out of this one." For a moment, I felt vindicated. Everything I'd endured, the threats, the humiliation, the vandalism, was finally being exposed for what it really was. But I also knew this wasn't the end. Not yet, because Richard Gaines was about to face something even bigger, a full courtroom trial. A few weeks later, I was called to testify. The courthouse buzzed with reporters and curious neighbors, whispering as I walked through the metal detectors. Cameras flashed outside the doors. Inside, the tension was thick. Richard sat at the defense table, wearing a suit that didn't quite hide how much he'd aged. His jaw clenched as I took the witness stand. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Daniels, started her questioning calmly. "Ms. Jensen, can you describe your interactions with the defendant while he served as HOA president?" I took a deep breath. "He targeted me. It started with a fine over my fire pit, something harmless, permitted under county law. When I refused to remove it, he escalated. Harassment, intimidation, public humiliation, even property vandalism." Richard's lawyer tried to interrupt. "Objection, speculation." The judge raised a hand. "Overruled, continue." I went on, my voice steady but full of emotion. "I tried to follow the rules, I tried to reason with him, but he saw power as ownership, not responsibility. When I pushed back, he tried to destroy me." At one point, Daniels projected photos of my vandalized garage, the red paint, the threatening words. Gasps filled the courtroom. "Ms. Jensen," she said softly, "who do you believe was behind this attack?" I looked directly at Richard. Him, even if he didn't throw the balloons himself, he incited it. He encouraged people to hate me. His face turned red. He whispered furiously to his lawyer, but I didn't flinch. When it was his turn to speak, Richard stood up, and in true fashion, he tried to play the victim. "This woman has waged a personal vendetta against me," he said, voice shaking. "She's made me look like a monster, ruined my reputation, my career. Everything she's saying is exaggerated or flat-out lies." The prosecutor smiled thinly. "Mr. Gaines, are these lies also what's in your bank records? Because according to our forensic accountant, over $120,000 in HOA funds were transferred directly into your personal account." You could have heard a pin drop. Richard froze. Then his lawyer leaned in, whispering fast, but the damage was done. The crowd murmured. Even the judge looked disgusted. The trial went on for days. Evidence stacked up, fraudulent invoices, altered meeting notes, even fake contractor payments. It was a mountain he couldn't climb. Then came the final blow. One of his own board members flipped on him. She testified that Richard had ordered her to keep residents in line and falsify inspection reports. By the time closing arguments ended, the verdict was inevitable. Guilty on all counts. Richard's face went pale. His wife, sitting in the back, covered her mouth in shock. He turned toward me as deputies led him away. For a moment, our eyes met, and I swear I saw something break in him, not anger this time, but shame. After the trial, life in Maplewood began to heal. The HOA was dissolved, replaced by a community association that actually listened to residents. People started hosting barbecues again. The tension was gone. One evening, the mayor himself stopped by my yard, the same one where it all began. "Ms. Jensen," he said, smiling, "you've turned this place into something special. The fair, the garden events, the sense of community, you brought life back here." I laughed softly. "All because someone tried to take away my fire pit." We both smiled. But even as peace settled in, part of me couldn't forget everything that had happened, the fear, the nights I wondered if I was safe. I realized something powerful. People like Richard thrive when others stay silent. But once you stand up to them, really stand up, they lose everything they built on fear. That night, as I sat by my fire pit, surrounded by neighbors laughing and sharing stories, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, true freedom. And this time, the flames didn't just warm my hands. They burned away every trace of what he'd tried to take from me. Would you have fought back like I did or tried to walk away? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for the finale, because in the last part, Richard's downfall sparks one final twist no one saw coming. The weeks following Richard's conviction were surreal. Maplewood, once ruled by silence and fear, had suddenly come alive again. Neighbors waved from their lawns, kids played on the streets without anxious parents calling them in at every car that passed. And for the first time since I'd moved in, I didn't dread opening my mailbox. But even though Richard was behind bars, the shadow of his rule still lingered. The HOA's funds were frozen, dozens of fines were still in dispute, and the insurance company was now investigating the damage he'd caused with fraudulent inspections. Every day felt like a new chapter of cleanup, a new mess uncovered. One morning, I got a knock at the door. It was Deputy Morales, the same officer who had been there the night the police broke up the county fair in my yard months ago. He smiled this time, his tone friendly. "Ms. Jensen, mind if I come in for a moment?" "Sure," I said cautiously. "What's going on?" He stepped inside, removing his hat. "We've completed our investigation, and well, you might want to sit down for this." He handed me a folder. Inside were documents, letters, fake citations, and an email chain from Richard's HOA account. My breath caught when I saw my own name mentioned. "He tried to get a private investigator to dig up dirt on you," Morales said. "Even after the fair, he was trying to find something, anything to use against you." I shook my head slowly. "Even after everything, he was still obsessed." "Yeah," Morales said grimly. "But the thing is, one of those emails also helped us uncover another scheme. He wasn't just targeting you. He had multiple homeowners under illegal fines. He was using HOA money to buy land under fake companies. You weren't his first target, Lydia. You were just the first one who fought back." Hearing that hit harder than I expected. I'd thought this was a personal feud, my fire pit versus his power trip. But now I realized. This man had been destroying lives for years and no one had stopped him. "Will there be more charges?" I asked. "Most likely," Morales said, "and because of your case, the county is now implementing oversight for every HOA in the district." I sat there in silence for a moment. Then I smiled faintly. Guess all that chaos was worth something after all. That weekend, I decided it was time to do something different, something to remind everyone that Maplewood wasn't defined by its past anymore. I planned one final event, the Maplewood Revival Fair. It wasn't just about rides or games this time. It was about unity, about closure. We set up booths run by local businesses, food trucks, even a small petting zoo, minus any HOA approval, of course. The community center donated its parking lot, and local radio stations agreed to broadcast live from the event. On the day of the fair, I stood by my fire pit, polished, decorated with fairy lights and flowers, watching as hundreds of people filled the street. Laughter echoed, kids ran by holding cotton candy, and the air smelled like popcorn and barbecue. Rachel approached me, holding 2 lemonades. "It's poetic, isn't it?" she said, handing me one. "The same place he tried to tear apart is now where everyone's coming together." I smiled. He wanted to control this neighborhood. Instead, he built its spirit, just not the way he planned. Suddenly, a group of reporters showed up, their cameras turning toward me. One of them, a local anchor I'd seen before, waved. "Ms. Jensen, Lydia, can we get a few words?" I froze for a second but nodded. "Sure." As the camera rolled, she smiled brightly. "You've become something of a local hero. What message would you give to people dealing with HOAs or bullies like Richard Gaines?" I looked around at the laughter, the bright lights, the life that had returned to our street. "I'd tell them that silence is what keeps people like him powerful," I said. "Speak up. Don't let intimidation or paperwork make you forget your rights. This," I gestured around, "this is what happens when you fight back. You don't just win, you change things." The crowd clapped softly around us. It wasn't loud, but it was genuine. As night fell, the fair reached its peak. Lanterns hung from trees, music played, and even the mayor gave a short speech honoring citizens who stood up for fairness and justice. My name was mentioned, and I swear my cheeks turned red. But as I walked home, something in the distance caught my eye, flashing red and blue lights. A police car parked outside a nearby house. My stomach tightened. When I got closer, I saw who it was, Morales again. He noticed me and walked over quickly. "Everything okay?" I asked. He hesitated. "You should probably know this. Richard S. been released on bail pending appeal. His lawyers filed some motion about improper evidence handling." I froze. "You're telling me he's out?" "For now," Morales said. "But don't worry, the DA's confident it won't hold. He can't come near you. There's a restraining order in place." But the moment I heard that name again, Richard Gaines, something cold crawled up my spine. I thanked Morales and walked home quietly, but my mind was racing. If there was one thing I'd learned, it was that Richard didn't stop easily. That night, as I sat by my fire pit, staring into the flames, I thought about everything that had happened. The laughter, the courtrooms, the flashing lights. Every battle had brought me to this point. But deep down, I knew something wasn't finished. Richard was back, even if just for now, and I could feel the storm returning. Would you be able to sleep knowing the man who tried to destroy your life was free again? Tell me in the comments, and stay tuned, because the final part will reveal the shocking twist that no one in Maplewood saw coming. The night Richard was released, I didn't sleep a wink. Every sound outside, a car door slamming, the wind brushing against my fence, made me sit up, alert. I hated that he still had that power over me, even from miles away. The next morning, I tried to act normal. I went for a walk, greeted neighbors, even stopped to grab coffee at the cafe downtown. But the tension followed me like a shadow. Everyone had heard Richard Gaines was back. Rumors spread fast in Maplewood. Some said he was trying to sue the HOA board members who testified against him. Others claimed he was moving out of town, but Rachel called me with something far more serious. "Lydia, have you seen the petition?" I frowned. "What petition?" "He's filing a civil suit against you personally. Claims your fair violated neighborhood zoning laws and caused property devaluation." My heart sank. "You're kidding me." "I wish I was. He's grasping at straws, but it's real. I already called the DA. They're furious. Apparently he's trying to use the appeal process to intimidate witnesses." It was unbelievable. Even after everything, the trial, the arrest, the media humiliation, Richard still refused to stop. 2 days later, I got a knock on the door. It was Morales this time. It was a process server, a man in a crisp jacket holding a thick envelope. "Ms. Jensen, you've been served." I stood there, stunned, as he handed me the papers. Inside, Richard Gaines versus Lydia Jensen. The irony almost made me laugh. He was suing me for defamation of character, unlawful assembly, and damage to reputation. Reputation, after he'd been convicted on multiple counts of fraud. Still, I knew I had to take this seriously. I called Rachel right away. "We're not letting this stand," she said. "If he wants to drag you back into court, we'll make sure the world sees exactly who he is." The second court battle was smaller, civil instead of criminal, but the tension was just as thick. Reporters packed the benches, eager for another headline. When Richard entered the courtroom, he looked different, thinner, tired, but that smug arrogance still clung to him like a shadow. He sat across from me, refusing to meet my eyes. His lawyer stood first. "Your Honor, my client's reputation has suffered greatly due to the actions and public statements of Ms. Jensen. We intend to prove that her unauthorized county fair was orchestrated as a public humiliation against him." The judge raised an eyebrow. "And the criminal conviction your client received?" The lawyer stammered. "That is under appeal." Then it was our turn. Rachel stood tall, every word sharp as glass. "Your Honor, my client's event was lawful, permitted by the county, and attended by over 300 people without incident. The only person who caused harm to this community is sitting right there, the same man convicted of financial fraud and harassment against multiple residents." She turned toward Richard, her tone dropping to a cold whisper. "This isn't about reputation. It's about obsession." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Even the judge leaned forward. Richard clenched his fists, but he didn't speak. Not until the judge gave him one last chance to address the court. He stood up slowly, his voice trembling with controlled rage. "She ruined my life, everything I built, my reputation, my respect, gone. And for what? A fire pit. A fire pit." He slammed his hand on the table. "She's not a hero, she's a parasite who thrives on drama." The courtroom fell silent. The judge stared at him for a long, heavy moment, then she sighed. "Mr. Gaines, I think you've made your own case better than your lawyer ever could." She looked to Rachel. "Case dismissed, and Mr. Gaines, you are hereby ordered to pay all legal fees." The gavel came down like thunder. Outside, the cameras were waiting again. Reporters shouted questions as Richard stormed past them, his face red and furious. I walked out moments later, calm, collected, the weight finally gone. "Ms. Jensen, any comment on the verdict?" I smiled faintly. "Sometimes justice doesn't come all at once, but when it does, it sticks." The crowd erupted in applause. A month later, Maplewood felt truly peaceful for the first time. The fair had become a tradition. Every summer now, the Freedom Festival filled the streets. The HOA had been replaced by a community cooperative, and neighbors who once whispered behind curtains now laughed together over lemonade. One evening, as the sun set, Rachel came over with a small wooden plaque. She handed it to me with a grin. "For you, from everyone in the neighborhood." I read it aloud. "To Lydia Jensen for reminding us that courage can build more than rules ever could." Tears welled in my eyes. "You guys didn't have to." "We did," she said, "because without you, this place would have stayed broken." That night, I sat by my fire pit again, the same one that started everything. The flames danced in the soft summer breeze, their glow reflecting off the plaque in my hands. For a moment, I thought about Richard, where he was now bitter, alone, blaming the world for his downfall. But then I realized something. He wasn't the story anymore. We were. The laughter of my neighbors drifted through the air, mingling with the crackle of the fire. The smell of barbecue, music from down the block, it all felt like healing. I leaned back, smiling. "You tried to take this away from me," I whispered softly, and instead it became my legacy. Would you have fought back like I did, or walked away and let them win? Tell me in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, because sometimes the best revenge is rebuilding stronger than ever.